spirituality, you occasionally come across the word surrender, and it's always spoken about as something that we may be asked to do sometime in the future, usually not taken to be something of imminent relevance. But the sense of surrender is really becoming or recognizing that we're an indivisible part of, inseparable from life, and to the degree that we hold ourselves separate from that, we suffer. So there's surrender, which basically means coming into alignment with life, let's say. And then there's resistance to life, to however life is presenting itself at some moment. That resistance is basically a no to life. No, I don't like what's happening right now. I don't like what this other person has said. They shouldn't be saying it. It's not right. It's not fair. Those kind of statements. Right. So this resistance is food for ego. Ego loves it. Ego thrives on it. Ego thrives on resistance. That sense of opposition, that sense of pushing life away is very gratifying for the ego. Ego likes that. With coming into alignment with life, being on board with whatever's happening, there's not much for ego to do there. It's, we still are called upon to respond to it, but we're not called upon to have an opinion about it or to determine who's to blame and who's right and wrong and what should and shouldn't be happening. Those are all questions above our pay grade. So the sense of surrender is not something that we can actually do, right? Because the question is, who is it that would want to surrender, and for what purpose? So the idea that I am, through my personal will, am going to surrender to life, it sounds noble, but underneath you can sort of feel it, that through my personal will, I'm going to surrender to the divine. Why? You can, if you just look just below the surface there, you can see self-interest. You can see why. Because it may be spiritually advantaged to do so. There'll be payoffs down the road, maybe heaven, maybe spiritual gifts, who knows. So surrender isn't something that we can do out of personal will, because it's precisely personal will that gets surrendered, right? That's the reason that we can't do it out of personal will. Personal will always has some element of self-seeking in it, and surrender is basically the absence of self-interest. Not as a noble thing or a spiritual thing or a virtuous thing, but simply as an acknowledgement of how things actually are. This is really the meaning of the spiritual instruction, to allow everything to be as it is. It's not really a strategy. It's not a strategy to get to something better. It's really an acknowledgement of how things are, and sort of almost a prayer to come into full recognition of that reality. It's very much in line with the biblical phrase, "Not my will, but thine be done." Right? It's not personal, right? So the sense of being surrendered is a relinquishment of personal will, but we can't we can't intentionally do that. Um, Generally, surrender is something that happens to us. It happens to us when we run out of alternatives. It's almost like the thing that it's the last choice that we have, right? When life gives us a situation from which there is no apparent escape, we come to a sense um, of being willing to relinquish this sense of control. Not because we do it willingly, just simply because we have no other choice, or this wisdom of no escape. And typically people unknowingly, unconsciously, don't do that until they have no choice, until, they get a terminal diagnosis, until a beloved one leaves or dies, or because their life situation or career has so drastically been altered outside of their control that they feel like there's nothing left to do but give oneself to life. But it's not, at that point, it's not really a voluntary thing, because there's not really a choice. It's if you only have one choice, it's not really a choice. What we can do is resist that, of course, which is what most people do throughout their life. Resist life. And like we said at the outset, that's very, very embracing for the ego. It feels powerful, me versus life. When we finally, hopefully, realize that life holds all the cards, then we're more inclined to be receptive to that kind of message. So that's one path. I mean, the path of resisting as long as we can possibly stand it. But that's sort of the more difficult, more time-consuming path. And it's a moment-to-moment thing. It's not like surrender is a once and forever choice. It's actually a moment-to-moment movement of our perspective towards life itself. When we're in alignment with what's happening in life, life feels good. We're basically saying yes to whatever is happening. It doesn't mean that we have to like everything. It doesn't mean that we have to agree with everything. It's just an acknowledgement that that is what's happening. It's an acknowledgement of the reality of how life is presenting itself. Once we stop disputing how life is presenting itself, when we resist life, then we're back into contraction. Then we're back into separation. Then we suffer. So those are the, like I say, the surrender's not a permanent state. It's a moment to moment, depending on how we're living, how we're perceiving life. Okay, so what we've talked about so far is sort of, allowing life to have its way with us to the point that we end up with no choice but to surrender. There is an alternative, fortunately. And the alternative is to recognize what's already surrendered. And what's already surrendered is our awareness, the awareness that we pointed to at the outset, the awareness that is that is what is knowingly present for everything that happens, everything that we've ever experienced, everything that we've ever thought or felt has only been consciously known because we're aware of it. Right? So this awareness itself, it is already surrendered. It is, in other words, it doesn't resist what's happening. Our mind certainly probably does most of the time, but the awareness itself is already surrendered. If something, um, if something happens within our field of vision, we're aware of it. We don't have to try to be aware of it. We are aware of it. And what that may be, it might be a beautiful thing. It might be a sunset. It might be a traffic accident. But the awareness would be present for both. Awareness is present for all the beautiful, uplifting things in life, all the really challenging things in life, and all those many moments of, our mundane, everyday existence. But it does so um, without preference. As a personal separate self, of course we have preferences. Naturally, we like this. We like a pat on the back. We don't like a blow to the head so much. Of course, we have preferences. But from the perspective of awareness receives everything. Doesn't hold on to anything. Doesn't push anything away. Doesn't try to manipulate anything. It is just aware presence. And that aware presence has intelligence. It's not a dumb, static awareness. It's an awareness that has intelligence. And from that intelligence, movement may arise. It's much more likely to result in an appropriate action or appropriate something that we say than if it comes out of our mental conditioning, comes out of our past, comes out of our agenda, comes out of our knowing about what is right and wrong. So if we can really sense into this capacity of the awareness and see that it itself is already surrendered, and that awareness is already what we essentially are, then this sort of shift into a sense of being surrendered to life, being available to life, being available to grace in a sense, becomes much, much easier. And by grace, I just mean life's tendency to give us opportunity after opportunity to see the truth of our own being. And when we see it, life flows. And when we resist it, we suffer. So life will give us ample opportunities. We get to take the lesson over and over again, as many times as we need. Life doesn't get frustrated. It's always available to present us with another opportunity to see our essential nature as this capacity to be aware and to recognize that as being our true nature isn't in any way dismissive of the amazing, beautiful, incredible creation that we're a part of, right? This, very highly pixelated appearance within consciousness. But the more we tune into this already existing capacity to be aware of whatever's happening, and recognizing that everything else comes and goes, everything else is transient, birth, life, and death, including these body minds. Then there's a sense of peace that there's something in this world that's not dependent on a belief. It is actually, when we recognize what it is, it's the most obvious possible thing, that which is aware of whatever arises. So whatever arises has a lifespan, has a duration, has characteristics that's always in flux. And yet there's one aspect, this one fundamental aspect of our life that is always present, alive, but unchanging, solid, dependable.